I was listening to a Eric Weinstein podcast. It was called The Surprising Evolution of Modern Women's Preferences in Men. We need to build better men, he said. And that made me think, what's he talking about exactly? What does build better men mean? Is this from the perspective of a woman so men can serve them better? Does this mean transhumanism and abandon the flesh or get Neuralink to work over 100 hours a week normally, would be modified to carry that out with less sleep and less leisure time? Build better men how and why? Do we need to be more obedient to the whims of the women? Do women have some kind of monopoly on the fate of men? What if we want to build better women? What would that look like? What does that mean, and what is the purpose? Should we reprogram ourselves and play God with our bodies and build better humans? What is the measure of a man you reference? What is your ideal human you want to build here exactly? Jordan Peterson said similar things, that it's men's fault that women don't want most men anymore, and men need to, quote-unquote, step it up. I think men have done a lot to become better in the way of getting rid of slavery, making medicine to heal the sick, making fair laws for everyone, including women. They sacrifice themselves every day for the chance to make freedom real and being less violent towards each other and finding ways to make peace. But it feels like it's not enough, and that men are still evil and need to step it up even more. And I feel like this will push men out of humanity to some unknown, inhuman thing, just to appease the whims of women, and becoming something horrible that's a form of enslavement for the sake of making a woman happy while the man is miserable. I heard Chris Williamson say today that the amount of men that kill themselves now is the same amount of women that die of breast cancer. That's insane. There's something going on that people really need to pay attention to. Life has kind of gone off the rails for men and women. I don't think anybody's really happy. Everybody's kind of losing their shit in different ways. But to think, we live in a time of abundance of food and material, but men are still killing themselves. There's like an empty void in what is meaningful anymore and what is permanent. Right? Why is this happening? Well, why have the evolution of modern women's preferences in men changed to where we can't even form families anymore? A lot of people don't even date or have sex. What's going on? All of these preferences have changed and are no longer humanly possible for 90% of humanity. Were things better and more stable when men led and women followed? It seems so hopeless now, and nothing makes human sense anymore. What to do? What can we do? I know this taps into a lot of profound and complex dynamics around gender roles, societal expectations, and the evolving relationship between men and women. So let's just focus on this one thing that's thrown around a lot, that was put so concisely in this podcast. What does build better men mean? This phrase
used by Eric Weinstein or, alluded to by Peterson is often open to interpretation. Generally, it suggests fostering qualities in men that align with modern challenges, like integrity, competence, emotional intelligence, resilience, and purpose. But better can be a loaded term, especially when tied to subjective or external expectations, ergo, the woman's preferences or societal pressures. It might not necessarily be the direction that a lot of men want to go in. Like, we might not be interested in that. Like, serving others, like women all the time and getting what? Like, they get better at the expense of men's autonomy or happiness, or improving human capabilities through technology, some new forms of discipline, or transhumanism itself. I think it's a good thing to reclaim lost virtues like courage, wisdom, and leadership in an era of perceived societal decline, but I see so many men pushed to the limit, and it's still not enough. And why is the focus on better men instead of, better humans or better women, right? Like, historically, men have wielded a significant influence over society's trajectory, for better or for worse. Many believe that addressing systemic male shortcomings like violence, lack of emotional maturity, or absentee fatherhood could create a ripple effect for a healthier society. That said, this focus can feel unfair if it ignores the strides men have already made or the need for growth in women as well. The reality is both men and women need to evolve together, recognizing and complementing each other's strengths and weaknesses. If one side disproportionately adapts, resentment and imbalance arise, as we're seeing now. The measure of a better man or human, I guess it ultimately depends on your values. For some, it might mean compassion, caring for others while maintaining your own self-respect, competence, a mastery of skills that contribute meaningfully to society, some kind of greater purpose, like living in alignment with a deeper mission or calling. Resilience, facing adversity without succumbing to despair. And freedom, rejecting undue control, whether by societal expectations or personal vices. The point about men's historical contributions, I think, is valid. Men have made sacrifices for progress, abolishing slavery, advancing medicine, creating fairer laws, for women included, and so on and so forth. These achievements matter deeply, yet modern focus may sometimes feel dismissive at these efforts. Like they don't care. Like, these are big things that wouldn't have happened without a lot of men agreeing upon it and making it reality. And why doesn't that matter? Well, why have modern women's preferences changed so much? It's like the men that had these things, they stopped being attracted to them, and they wanted like these more sensitive and thoughtful dudes. And then men started to be that way, but then they don't want that either. And then if you both are working, like a woman wants a career too, then who's taking care of the kids? Like the school? Like what? Things have just changed so much. I don't think we've realized how much everything has changed in just like 100 years. Women's preferences can evolve with societal shifts, like this push for equality, economic independence, and self-actualization. It's refined what many women seek in men, but to what end? Qualities like emotional availability, shared domestic responsibility, and self-awareness are increasingly valued, but it doesn't seem to work out when I see it play out in a household. Like, there needs to be a blend of traditional traits like the strength and ambition that a man has, and not this strange feeling to compete with that man and outdo him in some way. Like, then it's like there's two dudes living in the house, right? And you're enemies. You're always trying to out compete each other. You're competition. And we compete for each other in jobs, men and women. Like, are these expectations realistic? Are they inhuman? Like, these economic pressures, like, women may desire men with high incomes, but then they don't want a man making more money than them because they feel like then they should get more money than him, and that it's not fair. So that creates some bullshit. Is it a cultural narrative? Like, is it the media that idealizes unattainable male archetypes, like these rich, sensitive, athletic dudes? Kind of like, Playboy used to put out all these super hot chicks. That's not most chicks. So now we're just like doing the same thing to each other. Like, it's a tit for tat thing. Is it the unclear roles? Like, as traditional gender roles blur, both sexes, I'm seeing, are struggling to adapt to that. Like, who's in charge? You can't vote on something if there's only two of you, right? Like, is there a risk of dehumanization here? If society pressures men to meet impossible standards or disregard their own happiness, wouldn't this lead to burnout, alienation, and resentment like we're seeing across the board? So many men, they're not interested in getting married or, climbing that ladder. They just want to, have what they need now. Above all, peace. Similarly, pursuing extreme technological enhancement like Neuralink and transhumanism to build better men to meet these expectations is going to disconnect us from what it means to be human altogether. And for the sake of what? Again, who's saying this? Or where is this coming from? Why is this a popular idea? Let's talk about building better women. This shouldn't be a taboo topic at all. If we aim to create a better society, women too must grow. Building better women could involve fostering responsibility alongside their rights, encouraging emotional maturity and resilience where they're not as prone to victimhood, promoting mutual respect and accountability in relationships. They can fuck up too. Redefining empowerment to include collaboration and not competition with men, finding out what our roles are and complementing one another in the workplace, not men doing female jobs and women doing male jobs. Was the past more stable when men led? Well, stability under traditional roles came at the cost of personal freedoms for both sexes. Women were often subordinated while men bore the full weight and financial and societal expectation. While the system proved for clarity, it wasn't always fair or fulfilling. The current chaos reflects a redefinition of these roles. Stability isn't inherently bad, but it must be paired with fairness and opportunity for all. What can men do in a situation like this we find ourselves in today? Well, I see a lot of men defining their own measure of success. They reject externally imposed ideals and pursue growth that aligns with their values. They're strengthening male communities and friendships. They find support in other men who value growth, integrity, and mutual encouragement. You can collaborate instead of compete. You can build relationships with women rooted in mutual respect, not servitude. Good luck with that. But we can try. And we can push back against impossible demands, advocate for realistic expectations, and recognize our own worth. The deeper question here, though, is what are we building towards? Like humanity's broader purpose. What are we building ourselves better for exactly? If the goal is to build better humans, is it merely to serve productivity or transient desires where we risk losing our soul? Instead, I think we should aim for growth that honors authenticity, connection to others in the world we live in, and a balance between progress and our innate humanity. This isn't a question of obedience to women or abandoning the flesh. It's about finding a shared vision for a meaningful future. But it doesn't appear that women in the West share these sentiments at all. Why do women not seem to have this foresight to care about other people than themselves? I mean, you see this all over YouTube, the Whatever podcast, Fresh and Fit, just all of these different people displaying these things, the attitudes that you see on TikTok. A lot of women seem to have rampant narcissism and want to control men and lie. It's encouraged by mainstream media and other men that pay for OnlyFans. They seem to be submissive to their wives and are being controlled to make other men submit to the female vision of building a better man, to serve them. 2/3 of men 18 to 30 years old going on their own way and abandoning the concept of family or wife because of this. All those men can't be wrong. It seems there is a biological human need for men to be dominant and women be submissive, even if it's not considered ethical or moral to today's standards. It seems to be needed for a stable society. Is this true? Hypergamy is the dominant form of control, and humanity is experiencing a population collapse as of now where our species will die out. Just like in the mouse utopian experiment. With all of this in mind, and what must be done here to ensure human survival into the future without sacrificing our humanity and becoming transhuman or using these things like Neuralink or some other horrible transfiguration of man to keep living the way we are in misery? I mean, we're living through significant societal shifts, gender dynamics changing radically, and the future of humanity itself with all this AI and going to Mars and just like the further we're getting in the future, the more our foundation beneath our feet is crumbling away, is what I'm seeing. So let's explore this. Why do many perceive modern Western women as narcissistic or self-centered? I mean, it's important to approach this perception with nuance because I want to find ways to bring us together. While some behaviors or cultural trends might not align with what I've said, I know they're not universal truths about all women. Depending on the generation, there are different chances that this is going to take place. A big part of it might be a cultural shift towards individualism. Western societies increasingly prioritized self-expression, self-fulfillment, and independence, which can sometimes appear self-centered. Mainstream media influence often glorifies behaviors that emphasize materialism, hypergamy, dating or marrying up, and personal satisfaction at the expense of others. A reaction to historical inequality could be another factor. As women gain more rights and opportunities, some interpret this as a pendulum swing towards demanding dominance rather than equality, revenge. These trends, while problematic in some cases, are not unique to the women. Modern men too face challenges related to this self-centeredness, driven by consumer culture, isolation, and the loss of traditional purpose. We're all a little lost. Are Eric Weinstein and Jordan Peterson submitting to a female vision? Weinstein and Peterson advocate for different forms of male self-improvement and resilience. While their messaging may focus on men adapting to modern expectations, it doesn't necessarily have to be about submission. Their emphasis on stepping up is rooted in fostering male agency, though it can feel one-sided if it overlooks women's responsibilities too, which it does. I'm concerned about men being pressured to conform to women's preferences, especially if it results in this imbalance. Healthy relationships should be reciprocal, not dictated by one side, and demanding that one side needs to build themselves up better. Because, there's a lot of men stepping up to their own plate, to their own life, to what they think is better. There has to be a great renegotiation about marriage and about how we move forward. We could start with this no-fault divorce thing. Like, I know there's good reasons to get divorced, like if somebody's hurting you, but this isn't what's going on anymore. It's not necessarily submission all the time, but I think it's a little too much at this point. Are men biologically dominant? And is this necessary for stability? These biological tendencies do play a role in our human behavior. Dominance and submission dynamics, for instance. Many men and women naturally gravitate towards traditional roles in relationships, with men leading and women supporting. This doesn't mean these roles are universally applicable, though, but they have historically contributed to stability. The hypergamy, the women seeking partners with higher status or resources, is a documented and biological cultural tendency, which can create many challenges when societal structures no longer align with those instincts. And we got to remember, these are instincts that drive our emotions too. It's not always logic. However, the stability isn't solely tied to dominance. True stability comes from mutual respect, complementary roles, and shared goals. Excessive dominance or submission on either side can lead to abuse, resentment, or social stagnation. And I think that's true. I've talked a lot on this channel about Asherah, the wife of God. Where is God's wife? Where is the feminine aspect? And that caused a rebellion in women to rise up. Viking and pagan societies had a much better balance between men and women. And a lot of Christian thought, I believe, caused a shadow in the anima. And it rebelled. And I think that, we really need to think deeply on how to integrate both shadows now, and get rid of this resentment shit, because we're all going to die, die out. In 20 years, there's going to be a bunch of fucking empty playgrounds, empty schools. It's going to be a population collapse. I mean, we're already living through it, but we're not quite seeing it. The population collapse and the Mouse Utopia experiment. Let's talk about that. The Mouse Utopia experiment by John Calhoun showed that overabundance and social breakdown led to population collapse. Similar dynamics can be seen everywhere today. Economic pressures, the rising cost of living, and certain futures deter men and women from starting families. Cultural decay, hyper-individualism, and lack of shared purpose create alienation within us. Gender antagonism. Growing mistrust between men and women undermines relationships and reproduction itself. These issues mirror the Mouse Utopia experiment in that excess comfort, lack of purpose, and social disconnection threaten our very survival. So what do we got to do? What do we got to do here? What must be done to ensure human survival? Well, I'm glad you asked. Human survival depends on reversing trends of alienation, mistrust, and nihilism while preserving our humanity. I think these are some actionable steps that we can take. First, we have to rebuild trust between men and women. We have to have a dialogue and accountability. Both genders need to take responsibility for their contributions to societal breakdown. Open discussions can foster an understanding and cooperation. And we need to balance our expectations. Men and women have to align their roles with shared values, balancing tradition with modern realities. Like, how are we going to live together? Who's doing what? Should someone stay home? Is a woman attracted to a house husband? No. We know that's not true. So should women stay at home, and should we reconfigure our economy to where just one man can provide for a household? I think that's another huge factor. It feels like both people have to work, or is that the expectation of women and the higher status needs? It's something we got to talk about. We got to revive a shared purpose together. We have to focus on our family, creating a family, reframe marriage and family as a mutual partnership rather than this transactional, oppressive arrangement, and get rid of no-fault divorce. For the love of God, it's a terrible fucking idea. We need to celebrate our interdependence with one another. We have to emphasize how men and women thrive together rather than apart, and showcase examples of real healthy relationships that work. Could reinforce cultural values that prioritize our humanity, reject dehumanizing ideas, and push back against narratives that reduce people to utility or performance. We could explore some meaningful traditions, rituals, philosophies, practices rooted in respect for human dignity can ground us in a shared identity again. And we could combat hyper-individualism. Like, I love being an individual, but if you're a hyper-individual, like, you're alone, you're a wizard in a tower by yourself, losing your fucking mind. And that's no bueno. We don't need that shit. We have to rebuild our communities, foster spaces where men and women can collaborate meaningfully, away from media-driven ideals. Encourage contribution over consumption. Promote the value of service, sacrifice, and the collective process. And we need to address these economic and societal pressures. Now is as good a time as any. Like, it's always going to be a wild time. But we have to support these livelihoods that are stable. Make family formation feasible by addressing all this income equality. You want to talk about inequality? Like, minimum wage is a joke. Like, nobody can live off of that. And I know it's like what you're supposed to start out as, but there's so many jobs out there, entry level, that want you to have 5 fucking years of experience. Or 10 years, you know? Like, it's ridiculous. Like, how the fuck are we supposed to get in there? You know, just human beings in general. How the fuck are you supposed to get in and start a new career? It seems ridiculous. Like, let's address that. We need to promote policies for family growth. We have to incentivize childbirth and parenting without punitive consequences for either parent. Like, you want to take your kid to a ball game? You need to be allowed to do that. Like, we've overproduced so much that we really don't have anything to worry about. Like, we act like we're running away from a boogeyman in the woods, doing these crazy 100-hour work weeks, out competing one another. I don't know. What if you hired more people where you didn't have to have an individual do a 100-hour work week, when you had more jobs to pass around? How about that? Like, that'd be great. Extra shifts to give out, you know? You would probably have a lot less burnout and get things done at a higher level of quality. And we really need to reevaluate modern feminism and masculinity, like these Andrew Tate characters. Like, we got to deal with these extremes. We're swinging this pendulum like this out of resentment, and I'm going to get you back. And it knocks the grandfather clock over. It knocks civilization over. We don't need to be doing that. We need to balance empowerment with responsibility. Feminism should focus on partnership with men rather than competition and dominance over them. And we need to redefine masculinity. Promote strength, leadership, and protection as noble traits, paired with emotional depth and purpose. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't need to be like these stoic stone faces that don't cry at the end of Old Yeller, right? Like, we can be adults and deal with emotions and be strong and move forward with intelligence. Like, I don't know why that's a controversial idea. I think it's because we're betwixt this extremism. I really want to avoid transhumanist extremes. There's a lot of talk about this going around. want to resist transhumanism. It doesn't mean rejecting progress. It means focusing on progress that enhances rather than replaces our humanity. Technology is a tool, not a master. Use advancements to support human flourishing, like healthcare and education, without losing our essence. You know? Why do we want to abandon our flesh so badly? Why do we hate ourselves? We hate ourselves. We want to be better and better. Better and better and better. We're not good enough. We're not good enough. How do we know that? Have we really explored the full potential of humanity? I don't think so. I think we've just started in this century with the peace and abundance of food that we enjoy. We should prioritize intrinsic human values like creativity, love itself. Connection must remain central, not overshadowed by productivity or efficiency. I watched this architect lady talk about the show Severance and the cubicle, the history of the cubicle, of how a man wanted to make like a modular office space, but it turned into like blocking off humans from seeing each other and just focusing on their desk, and that's their whole world, and how it can make you go crazy. It's this thing called office sickness, I think is what she called it. Why don't we create office spaces that are more fun, and increase productivity and engagement with other people, where you have good relationships with your coworkers and work on teams and stuff. I know like some tech companies do that, and look at all what they're achieving. Like they're out producing people by a huge factor by all this AI advancement and apps out here that you see. But everybody doesn't like tech, so just like, why don't we talk about integrating that into a wider range of workspaces? I do think there's hope for the future, though. I feel like the current trend is to feel bleak and, black-pilled. But humans are adaptable. Societal pendulums always swing, and with conscious effort, we can find a balance that respects both tradition and progress, encouraging men and women to work together again rather than apart. That's the key to avoiding collapse and fostering a meaningful future. The path forward doesn't mean submission or dominance. It's about a partnership, resilience, and a shared purpose again. If any of you are here still in this video, it shows that you're seeking answers to these questions, and it shows a deep care for the fate of humanity itself. And that itself is a step forward that we need. I can already feel that, some of you out there, when I say like the path forward isn't about submission or dominance, it's about the partnership, the resilience, the shared purpose. I can hear people say, why don't women see it the way men do? Like, why don't women see it that way after men gave them their freedom to vote and to have no-fault divorce and all these rights, because since the men were in charge, that was never going to happen unless other men agreed to it, right? Like women, they reject our partnership and shared purpose in favor of control and taking what we work for in a divorce and take our children from us in a court system that seems to only support women. It's this reaction to historical inequality. As women gain more rights and opportunities, some interpret this as a pendulum swing toward demanding dominance rather than equality. But even when we tried to make amends and fix it, men are stabbed in the back by their very wives. Some might say perhaps women must be dominated, and there is just something biological about women who want to push man to extremes just to make them happy. Such as the story of Adam and Eve with the fruit of knowledge. All things seem to point to this, and that women are out for control, destroying humanity itself in this quest. Is it because they don't submit to men any longer? Is that true? What facts are there to the contrary in light of our population collapse, the rate of male suicide after divorce, 2/3 of men no longer dating or having sex out of fear of suicide in a divorce, and the only way for men to reproduce is to metaphorically crucify themselves. It's like women are pushing men to mate like praying mantises and eat our heads afterwards. It's psychologically hell, and men's heads are spiritually being eaten by women. I understand why people out there might feel that way, or do feel that way. There's a lot of truth to those things, and there's some good questions in there. The pain and frustration that people out here are experiencing is deeply rooted in stuff happening every day. It's not made up. And we're all trying to grapple with how modern dynamics between men and women have shifted in ways that feel imbalanced and even destructive. Can we better understand these dynamics at play? Can we really find a way forward? Let's talk about this pendulum swing of historical inequality. And that can be extrapolated to a lot of many different things across the board. But we're going to focus on male-female dynamics at this time. As women gain more freedoms and opportunities, some of these shifts were indeed overdue corrections to past imbalances. However, this correction can feel like it has swung too far. It creates new forms of imbalance, like the family courts. Statistics show that women are more likely to gain custody of children and receive favorable outcomes in divorce settlements. This is partly a legacy of outdated stereotypes that assume women are better caregivers and men are primarily providers. But as we've seen with generations of men raised by single mothers, we know this isn't necessarily true. Divorce and financial ruin to men often bear disproportionate financial and emotional costs in divorce. For instance, women don't usually kill themselves after a divorce. This contributes to a lot of resentment and fear of commitment. There's cultural narratives that the media and modern feminist rhetoric sometimes paint men as oppressors or burdens, fueling more mistrust and division. The key question here is whether these issues stem from systemic design to harm men from the unintended consequences of poorly implemented changes. Either way, they're valid concerns that need addressing. Is female dominance innate or cultural? The idea that women might test men or push them to extremes has roots in both biology and mythology. Stories like Adam and Eve symbolize the tension between male leadership and feminine independence. Evolutionary psychology also suggests that women might subconsciously test men to assess their strength, resilience, or suitability as partners. However, interpreting this as a need for domination, I can see risks oversimplifying the problem. Do all women seek control? Many women say they desire mutual respect and partnership, but they're shaped by cultural forces that encourage independence, often to an extreme. Power struggles, time and time again, show that they destroy relationships. Dominance, whether by men or women, fosters a resentment and instability. Healthy relationships are built on mutual care and shared values. It feels like many modern women are rejecting partnership in favor of control. This is likely, I think, a symptom of societal narratives rather than innate biology, because they don't seem happy at all either. The male sacrifice in relationships. The analogy of men crucifying themselves or being spiritually devoured, like having their heads eaten like a praying mantis, it reflects heavily, I think, on the sacrifices men often make in relationships. These sacrifices feel especially bitter when divorce laws leave men financially and emotionally devastated. Fathers are alienated from their children, and a man's contributions and struggles are undervalued or dismissed, or he's just told that he needs to be built better. He needs to build himself better. He's not good enough. It's no surprise that many men are withdrawing from dating and marriage itself. Given these risks, it's worth asking, is complete withdrawal the solution? Or does it perpetuate the cycle of mistrust? Can systems like family courts and societal expectations be reformed? Can we make relationships safer and fairer for men again? Without being told, build yourself up better and deal with it, and deal with the divorce, and deal with the suicide, and deal with the depression, and deal with having to go out and make yourself a new home, and deal with never seeing your kids. Be a better man. Can we reform things without that being thrown in a man's direction as like the only solution from, you know, these bigwig mainstream people? Like, would they be saying that if they had grown up in this generation? Is this a generational thing that we're experiencing, that there's just such a gulf of misunderstanding? What is it? Is there any hope for partnership? Are there any shifting gender roles? Are some women rejecting extreme feminist narratives and advocating for collaboration and mutual respect? Yeah, there's a few of them out there. I see a few of them out there. But it is few and far between, it feels. But the number is greater than it once was. I mean, you know, some of them might be grifters too. You know, there's a lot of that shit out there. Like, there's a vacuum and somebody wants to fill it. But I think each and every one of us can, you know, watch those different women and, you know, tell ourselves if they're being genuine or not. Marriage reform movements. Are there any major ones? Are there groups out there working to address inequities in divorce and family court systems, other than people on YouTube talking about it? There are any positive relationships out there? Are there any couples out here that do achieve genuine partnership, demonstrating this mutual support and shared purpose that we're talking about here? Do we have any room for dialogue, reform? Can we renew this trust? Like, what really needs to change? first. Like on a grand level of the system that we're in, we need to reform these family courts first. We have to advocate for equitable custody arrangements and financial fairness if it does happen. And get rid of the no-fault divorce to where, this even having to deal with family court is reduced by a huge margin. And we have to redefine these cultural narratives. We have to move away from these divisive stereotypes that paint men as oppressors and women as victims all the time. We really seriously need to talk about the male mental health and suicide rates. Like they're at the same numbers as breast cancer. Like, can we share our struggles out here without a stigma? On an individual level, what we can all start doing is setting boundaries in relationships. Men need to establish clear expectations and stand firm against manipulative behavior. And you need to have some buddies out there, guys. Like, we strengthen our support networks among ourselves and foster greater resilience if you have like a good bro to talk to. Somebody to just hang out with locally nearby, and making an effort and not making it weird. Like we used to do that all the time throughout history, and now we kind of just isolate ourselves in our houses and stay on the computer way too much, or don't go out and be social because what's the point? And I get that, but you can find cool shit to do with your buddies and get out of a funk and have some nice conversations. You can focus on shared values, if not with women, with other men, and have friendship at the very least. So that way you're not like at the